Hello and welcome to today's program. My name is Ethan Chazin. I am the founder of the New York-based organizational development firm, the Chazin Group. I'm so excited that you could join me today for this, I hope, thought-provoking webinar on how to manage change in a post-COVID environment. So what we understand at its most basic fundamental level is that change is critically important for continuing to grow your organization as well as grow yourself in your career and your professional development. Progress is impossible without change. And what we've experienced as we came out of a global pandemic is that, unfortunately, in many regards, many organizations and many senior leaders are still woefully unprepared and unwilling to embrace the inherent chaos and fear and uncertainty that we have with change in order to continue to navigate challenges and seize opportunities. So that's what today's webinar is intended to do. We know that not all change is good. So let me start out with that as a fundamental premise. We know it from Ken Blanchard. But in a world that's constantly changing around us, we have to be willing to embrace change to succeed. And yet that's the inherent fundamental challenge, is that change is scary. It's uncertain. The outcome is unknown, unpredictable. We are human beings, creatures of habit, thus fundamentally resistant to change. But we have to change. So that is the crux. And that is why, in my consulting practice, I come across many organizations, many individuals tasked with implementing change that are stuck post-COVID. And so that's what today's webinar is intended to do, is to give you some immediately actionable strategies to embrace change for your continued success. So we know that change is at its core fundamentally good in terms of enabling us to adapt, but it's problematic. It's challenging. That's our premise. So what can you, as a member of your leadership team, what can you and your organization change? Starters, a shift from a management mindset to a leadership mindset. We know that management is indicative of the past. It's about controlling resources like your employees, thinking about your employees as if they're assets. It's based in the 20th century. But to succeed in the 21st century, with so much change that's happening around us, we need to shift our model from a management style approach to leadership. Leadership is about knowing the way, showing the way, going the way. It's about rising up everybody around you to achieve success. You can think about your people initiatives to change to a culture of leadership. You can think about your strategic approach. You know, a lot of organizations that I coach and consult with, when we talk about strategic planning, they talk about basically minor incremental changes year over year. Your strategy needs to adapt in 2024 a fundamentally different mindset. Sure, keep what's working, but constantly look at your strategy in terms of modifications and tweaks. What are your policies and procedures that have to be changed right now? And at its core is your culture. I spent the better part of a decade looking at all the top performing, financially performing companies all over the world in terms of those organizations that were number one or number two leaders in their respective sectors and industries. And my mindset was, what if any attributes or characteristics do all of the most successful organizations share? And after going on 8 or 9 years, and what led me to write my second book called The Compassionate Organization, was that one characteristic stood out to me. It was organizations that have a employee-driven, compassionate culture outperform their competitors. So let's talk about how to get there. We know people are resistant to change. I've certainly come across it in my 30 plus years in business, and 15, going on 15 as a consultant. We know that people don't change a moment before they need to. And when I say they need to, it's typically some external outside your organization event that triggers a need for you to react to some challenge or pursue an opportunity, but that change is not typically something inside your organization that you have a thought leader or champion to drive the change. We need you to be the agent of change in your organization. What prevents meaningful change is a prevailing executive team mindset. I cannot tell you how many times I come across this in being asked to change organizations' performance and its people productivity initiatives. Different. Anything that's different or outside of the scope of this is how it's always been done can be met with barriers of change implementation and our habits. If it ain't broke, don't break it. No. We know that good is the enemy of great. Just good enough won't guarantee success in the future in a post-COVID world of doing business. Change is an opportunity. Change is fundamentally a chance to shift the conversation from based on fear of the unknown, resistance to try new things, to one focused in your organization on hope, a collective set of hope and opportunity in which your organization and all of your stakeholders that you interact with day in and day out, and your people, not only your leaders, but all your people can embrace this thing called change to win. Win, however you define it, whether you're a for-profit competing for consumers, customers, whether you're a nonprofit competing for very, very challenged funding sources these days, whether you're a government agency. So the notion of change as an opportunistic tool in your business survival toolkit. It's time for change. We know this. As we came out of COVID, I'm still dealing with the organizations I consult with who are saying, no, we want our people to come back to work, or we want our people to stay remote. No, we talk about hybrid work. There needs to be a hybrid mindset as we embrace meaningful change in our organization to ensure lasting competitive advantage and success. So why bother going down this road? Well, to quote Dr. Phil, how's that working for you? Your resistance, your almost pathological historical resistance to change. In other words, what's working, what's not? Are your people ready and prepared to change? Maybe the matures boomers and us Gen Xers are not quite receptive to changing the way we do business, but sure as heck, your younger millennials and your Gen Zs are literally chomping at the bit to come in and help you change your organization and shift its focus. So you start with, after what happened, what we lived through with COVID, what in the world of work needs to be changed? And we go through strategic planning around this foundation of change implementation. Does it mean new products or services? After we were at a world of socially distanced lifestyle, what's changed in your business model? Who are your new funding sources? Who are your most supportive employees? Who are your most supportive clients, vendors, partners? Those students in the communities in which you do business, they are a phenomenally powerful recruiting source. How are you tapping into those potential wells of opportunity for talent acquisition and talent management? What's driving change is what's always driven change, except the accelerated pace of it. So what do I mean by that? The rapid rate of technological transformation and change is one fundamental driver. We know that it takes a global village. We know that there's competition down the road from you and all the way across multiple time zones. We know that there's a transformation in the American population. Those 340 million Americans, there's a constant volcanic eruption of change in preferences, tastes, lifestyles. You can resist it at your own peril. That's all I'm saying. There's a shift in the way people are consuming digital media, technology, the internet, fashion trends, culture, lifestyle, the immersion of pop and sport. It's just this explosion of constant chaos. And on top of that, there is a new socially distanced world order, which is a holdover, a vestige of a global pandemic in which 1 million plus Americans lost their lives. So how do we go about incorporating all of that chaos into a culture that adapts, responds, and gets ahead of change drivers? You need to constantly be willing to understand where the change is coming from, both inside and outside your organization. You need to be proactive enough to plan around risk management, contingency planning, succession planning, business planning. All of that chaos can be planned for in terms of exercising your organization to prepare for and adapt and respond to and act proactively around this thing called change management. And then there's a last thought I want to leave you. Most organizations that I've experienced in 20 plus years working in the private sector and then going on 15 years as a coach and a consultant, driving organizational change initiatives, many organizations fail. Let me say this slowly. Many organizations fail because they do not communicate enough, as in marriages and relationships, the way it is at work. No organization ever gets into trouble because they communicate too much. So what's the plan when it comes to planning for change? Define the scope of all of the change drivers and initiatives. Identify who in your world are powerfully supportive stakeholders. Stakeholders are those collective groups of people who fill buckets called employees, clients, vendors, partners, contractors, government agencies. Those are the collective stakeholders. Then you build your team, not around job responsibilities or job descriptions, but around skills. You may call them pejoratively, the word is soft skills, but you talk about things like critical thinking, collaboration, team building, leadership. Those are the skills that you want to build your teams around and teach the individuals who comprise your team what are the skills that are necessary for success today. And then as you adapt to and respond to and proactively plan for the uncertainty of future change. It's a roadmap. You can call it a business plan, but I want to go a little bit different on this. Instead of a business plan, which is the operational policies, procedures, I want to get into a mindset of it's a roadmap of change implementation. You need a sponsor, somebody who's well respected in your organization, a thought leader, ideally somebody on your leadership team who is going to be the agent of change. They're given full remit, full control, full power from your ownership and your leadership team to be able to be the change agent needed to drive that change, whether it's a project basis or holistically change across your whole organization. Who do you need to have consensus achieved or buy-in from to organizationally embrace and adapt to a culture of change? You need to document what success will look like in this new constant chaotic change world order. So the change curve is something that is pretty instructive. So the Kubler-Ross change curve looks a little bit like this. What typically happens is you're dealing with the status quo, which maybe was pre-pandemic, before March, April 2020. All of a sudden, you're going along and status quo is doing things the way they always were, and something typically external comes in and impacts your organization unexpectedly. The reaction is initially deny. This change has happened, this threat or this opportunity has come across your bow. Be in shock and therefore not be willing to adapt to it. One way past that is to get all the information you need, start to gather that information and prepare by communication. So immediately this change is going to cause pain. It's inevitable. according to the Kubler-Ross change curve. So there's going to be some disruption to your business in terms of being able to source funding, supply chain issues, a war on talent, whatever it's called. That set of collective disruptions to your business continuity creates an element of organic organizational fear, resistance, anger. The way to circumvent that or to overcome that set of disruption or to minimize the adverse impact is to watch, listen to what's going on, and prepare to support the initiatives of change that will be required. Then, as we start to adapt and shift and modify and prepare and defend against, that's the exploration stage. And that's typically where I'm brought in as an organizational agent of change with my clients to help embrace the fear and the chaos and the unknown. Business continuity planning, risk management, succession planning, strategic planning or replanning initiatives, training and developing your workforce. Me also providing executive coaching and also consulting around culture transformation. We not only accept the need for change, but we're starting to set in motion those strategies and initiatives that allow us to explore what are our opportunities for refining our business model. What are some new things that we can do? Test, 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 test. Get ready to dip your organization's proverbial toe in the shallow end of the change pool. And then as you facilitate more programmatic and culture-bound change management initiatives, you're going to take those lessons learned in that test and trial phase of exploration and implement it throughout your organization. This is where I've achieved the most success in going on the last 15 years or so in terms of being an agent of change to help organizations navigate through these uncharted waters in these troubled times. So that's the model. And if you think about change as a process, John Kotter has an exceptional 8-stage process on this. So the 8 steps are as follows. There needs to be a sense of urgency. You probably have already felt it in your organization since we came through, we saw the light at the end of the COVID tunnel with things like work from home, remote, hybrid. The sense of urgency may be a war on talent. Getting highly qualified people to come into your organization, commit to your organization, stay in your organization, and achieve success there. So that's the sense of maybe urgency. We knew during COVID that supply chains, we couldn't get the resources, the material that we needed to offer our services and build our products. There was the urgency. So that was triggered as step 1 in Kotter's model. Then you need a guiding coalition, a change team. Do you have a change team? I don't care if you're 5 employees or 50,000. You need a team in place to steer, to lead this change initiative. You have to have a clearly defined vision and the associated initiatives around what change looks like for your organization. And this is something that I'm happy to talk to organizations about. So you need an army. You need an army of your organization's VIP brand ambassadors comprised of your most loyal employees, your most loyal customers, stakeholders, partners, contractors, suppliers. Again, you need an army. That's step 4 in Kotter's model. Step 5 is knock down those barriers. You know, it's Reagan to Gorbachev. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. We need you. You need to be able to remove the barriers, which is why it typically is most helpful when I work with organizations to identify a change agent who's empowered, whoever she or he or they are empowered. They are almost tasked with removing barriers to being able to adapt to and proactively plan for necessary change in your organization. Have a few wins. You have identified in your change management planning process, you've prioritized projects associated with tasks, and each task has an owner or owners and contributors, start and end dates, priority. You're setting yourself up to have discrete wins to build a culture of change. You need little victories along the way that guide your organization towards understanding, almost muscle memory, what success at change implementation looks like. That's step 6. Then you increases, ideally, you're going to start this in the 3rd quarter, leading into the 4th quarter, where we are now. We're approaching the 4th quarter. So as we approach the 4th quarter, you want to build up steam. You want change wind in your sails that'll help navigate the 4th quarter of 2023 and preparing and planning for 2024. And you're instituting in the next few months through a change planning roadmap document the institutionalized change that your organization needs. And this is typically where I'm brought in, is in the planning stages of developing a formal change roadmap. So we know that in the same way, mourning the loss of a loved one, you're mourning the loss of change, where you're leaving your organization's old, outdated way of doing things to a new stage. So if you look at this 6-stage process, it's interesting. It walks you through your organization literally being recreated and transforming itself from a current state of uncertainty, loss, fear, being hesitant, resistant, almost as if you're organizationally paralyzed, to start to lean into and set the foundational groundwork for being receptive to change. And if you're not sure how to implement the movement from stage 1 of loss to stage 2 of doubt, and moving into a little bit of trial and exploration, discomfort into discovery, if you're uncertain about getting from stage 1 to stage 4 in this map or this schema, please don't hesitate to let me know if you'd like to discuss how we can implement a roadmap to navigate through the 6 stages. So, apologies. One of the things that's come up as a holdover or vestige of a global pandemic is allowing your people to define what works best for them. What this means is you don't arbitrarily create an institution-wide policy on whether people work from home, they have to come in, or some hybrid schedule. You let the circumstances of each individual dictate what their work schedule looks like. What's most important here is a word called autonomy. You want to empower your employees to be able to pick and choose, according to Daniel Pink, the 4 stages or the 4 tests of autonomy, meaning your employees get to pick 4 things: what they work on, who they work with, where they work from, and when they do the work. You hire professionals, you hire grown-ups, you hire rock stars, you bring in the best talent, and you give them all the tools, the resources, the freedom, the autonomy, the empowerment they need to be successful, and then you unleash their untapped potential. That's an effective starting point as you think about writing your change management roadmap blueprint document for success. So we know that studies that were conducted several years ago of the state of remote work, we know that during the global pandemic, nearly all people were able to work remotely. Before it, less than a third. 7 out of 10 managers said that working from home was not only comparable to working in an office environment, but it was actually, when proactively managed by your organization, when it was proactively managed, it benefited your people to work at a higher level of performance and productivity. We know that nearly all workers want some flexibility in being able to dictate the terms of autonomy in their work, when they work, where they work from, how they work, and who they work with. So contingency planning is just a sexy way of saying, I know that if this happens, then we will do that. If then is a perfect way to encapsulate contingency planning. So think about scenarios your organization is currently grappling with. Scenario 1, we lose a client that we derive 65% of our revenue from. We lose a supplier who's generating 40% of our material to build this specific product line. If this happens, then what do? What will happen? So those are the positives or the pros of that scenario. Conversely, the cons or the potential deltas or negative impacts, if this happens from a negative perspective, then what are we faced with? And that's literally the most simplistic yet elegant way of preparing for contingency planning. What is risk management? Risk management is there are threats that our organization is exposed to. And it's not just cybersecurity or the war on talent. Risk is everywhere. It's everywhere, right? It's everywhere that exists currently inside and certainly outside of our organization. So what are the tools in your risk management toolkit to navigate through this chaos? Contingency planning, which I'm more than happy to talk to you about the policies or the strategies around that. You need to have buy-in, full funding and support from your senior management team, your leadership, that you're going to have a formal risk management team in place to plan around risk and mitigate risk. And if you're not sure how to go down this road, there are many people who specialize in different aspects of risk management. For risk management to work effectively, you want to include all of your stakeholders into formulating a holistic 360-degree risk management strategy. You want to bring in all of the disparate projects that are being handled by all of your functional areas of your business. By function, I mean HR, finance, sales, marketing, customer care, R&D. Those are all the functions. So you want to bring them all into this 360-degree risk management project initiative. You have to monetarily set aside funding to do risk management. And you also have to communicate constantly this thing called risk management planning. And that's why if you're not certain how to go down this road, there are organizations, there are people who excel at this. And I'd be happy to talk to you as an organizational development coach, how to plan risk along with contingency and succession planning to give you a truly powerful defense array against change and chaos and the unknown. Chaos is scary. It's disruptive. It can be powerfully disruptive. But chaos is a state of great confusion or disorder. It is a massive, massive unknown uncertainty. There's very little order, or in the state of science, it's entropy. Things organically gravitate to a state of instability over time. That's all the chaos is. So how do you as an organization take all of this confusion and disorderly conduct and put it into a type of chaotic management? Well, we know that your strategies often fail. That's what chaos looks like. We did all this planning and preparation, and yet we didn't anticipate certain external factors or considerations in our market, or we didn't anticipate the chaos inside our organization of these unknown actions or things that happened. Things like we understaffed for a project, or we had escalating costs. That's where chaos derives from. And sometimes what that chaos leads to is you're not able to achieve your desired goals. So in the extreme, chaos can pose a threat to the very existence of your organization's survival. And therefore, chaos is seen as something to be avoided. Well, how do we adapt? We plan for it. You plan for chaos. So as you're getting ready to head into the third quarter and write your business plan for 2024 that you'll finalize sometime between October and December, right? The benefit of any process of planning is not in the ultimate document. That's not what you go through business planning for. It's the process of the planning that prepares you for that chaos. When you have organizationally a gut feeling, or an individual who's a leader on your executive team has a gut feeling about an idea for a new product or service, a way to streamline, create operational efficiency, to reduce cost. Go with those gut feelings. Those gut feelings are there. That fight or flight syndrome, that gut feeling is predicated on your collective experience that gives you that ability to pinpoint an opportunity or avoid a threat. Don't overanalyze. It's called paralysis of analysis. Your research and preparation can take you only so far. So that's why we don't stick to our business plan, even if things go off the rails. We prepare through the planning and the contingency planning, risk management, succession planning. We have those if-then scenario prepared roadmaps. We don't want to lock into a plan. If it ain't working, be prepared to deviate from that. And what that means is a new post-COVID world order of change adaptation in which we may have shifting or moving priorities and therefore demands placed upon us. So how you navigate through these shifting priorities in your organization is celebrate as a team all of your victories. Have constant conversation with all your people. What's working? Why? What's not working? Why? If this happens, then what do we do? It's the best way I can frame it for my clients is it is a continuous process of ongoing improvement through introspection, looking inside. You know, marketers will understand this phrase called the SWOT, your strength, weakness, which is inside your organization. And that's what you're constantly being finger on the pulse of. But SWOT, the opportunities and threats are outside of your organization. So the introspection is looking inside yourself, your people, your team, your business offering, your employees. And then you're also looking outside to see how well aligned you are with those shifting, evolving, changing, chaotic trends in the marketplace. So I want to talk about problem solving. I've been teaching this for going on 30 years. There is a powerful arsenal of tools that you possess in your organization by giving your people the autonomy, empowering them to deal with solving problems creatively. So the two most important questions you and your people can ask is why? Why does this happen? Why is this always the case? Why do we rely on this one vendor or contractor? Why? Why? The problem with the question why is that little children ask why, right? If you've ever been a parent or godparent or grandparent, you'll know the most annoying question that any little child can ask is why? Why? But guess what? We learn the most as human animals. We evolve and take in the most knowledge between birth and the age of around 5 or 6 or 7, because we're always asking why. It's how we're bringing information constantly. And I talk about introspection. This is a perfect example. And at some point through school and your parents and your teachers and your social networks, we take that word why and we get rid of it. I don't want you to get rid of the word why. Empower your people to keep asking why. And I said there were 2 powerful questions. The second is what if? This is a glorious way to allow your people, to empower your people to plan for chaos and uncertainty and change. What if, I mentioned before that scenario playing of the pros and cons of if this happens then. Well, when we talk about a culture of change adaptation and navigating chaos, why and what if are the 2 most powerful questions you can institute for your workforce. So do it. Do it is just a process of defining what the problem is for your team, opening your mind, your team's mind, to creative, maybe new ways to solve that problem. Identify what the solution or multiple solutions are. If you're lucky, you may have more than one solution. And transform is to put things in place monetarily, assign a team, shift resources and prioritization around to transform the solution into practice. That's a do-it model. I want to say something about brainstorming. Brainstorming has its role, but brainstorming as a collective team way to gather ideas, prioritize them, allocate by prioritizing the solutions, a way of approaching each of those solutions. Brainstorming is flawed. Brainstorming often encourages or rewards the most vocal people on your team. And what it often doesn't do, it often misses out on the roughly 30% of the population that is introverted, that sits back, that doesn't feel comfortable in a group setting, that may be inclined not to speak so freely, but they gather information, they're more analytical, they're less willing to share their ideas verbally. So instead of always brainstorming, it's something called brainwriting, where you gather feedback from your team to have them write out for the problem or problems, what are their solutions? You gather them up, you give those ideas, suggestions out to other people. They can comment on that first person's ideas. They can come up with suggestions, ask questions, and you go through that process of writing potential viable solutions through 3 rounds. So collectively, brainstorming is a tried and true, in many scenarios, way of gathering new ideas and solutions to problems. Brainwriting encapsulates or captures the creative input of the introverts. Walt Disney was known when he would get his animators together to create something new, going back to 1958 with the first animated motion picture, Steamboat Willie. He'd get his people together and he'd say, if there were no limitations whatsoever, how would we solve this problem as dreamers? So it was kind of like Google with Blue Sky. There are no limitations. So then the dreamer round of feedback would be to come up with all these potential ideas. Then you'd give those ideas without any limitations to the teams, and then they'd realistically have to criticize, add comments, whatever. So the second round is the realistic approach to refine the dreamer solutions to make them more practical or implementable. And then the third level is the critic level, where you really tear into these potential ideas and you go through all 3 stages with your team or teams. Blue Sky, as I mentioned, Google, Kohl's, Nucor, Steel, Wegmans, many organizations basically allocate time and resource for their entire workforce to be able to come up with new products, new services, cost reduction policies, procedures, new strategies. Blue Sky is free time to think about potential solutions, offerings, opportunities. What are you doing to gather the collective input and problem solving and creativity of your workforce? So this is what Blue Sky is all about. No limitations whatsoever. So starbursting comes from the field of journalism. We ask, when we're dealing with an idea or potential challenge that may pose a threat to our organization's existence, who does this impact? What's really at stake here? How do we navigate? So that how is kind of like scenario planning. Where is this going to happen or impact us? When? What's the potential time frame? And why? Why did this happen? Why do we need to undertake this? That's starbursting. Metaphorical thinking is a way of putting together 2 seemingly unrelated solutions or product offerings or services. So the best example I can give for metaphorical thinking is time is money. Right? Time is money. Well, no. How did this happen? Time had nothing to do with money when we were an agrarian society, but then all of a sudden Henry Ford invented the labor where you'd go into the cities and you'd work on a factory, on a shop floor and the conveyor belt, and you do your little task, and then all of a sudden we were paid a certain amount per hour. And as soon as that repetitive task worked, we were able to conceptualize the value of money as how many widgets we touched in terms of final product produced. So there was a correlation between 2 seemingly different things, time and money. So attribute listing. Look in your organization right now in terms of functionally, go across the functions of your business or your nonprofit or your government agency. And we look at how there are interdependencies. How do we source materials? How do we fulfill all of our orders in terms of We get in requests from our customers. How do we work that backwards? Where does product development coming up with new products and services? So you can see attribute listings are the different considerations of all of the functions. I want to talk about, when we talk about change, we need a new map. And this is what COVID has taught me and all of the organizations I'm lucky enough to work with. We can't solve problems within the framework of how they were created. We can't continue to do what we did before and expect that to be something we solve. I mean, that's Einstein's classic definition of insanity, right? Performing the same task and expecting the same outcome. So I want to share a final thought, and I thank you for your time today. But when life gives us lemons or challenges, turn them into opportunities. Turn our proverbial chaos and uncertainty of lemons, metaphorically speaking, into lemonade. Seize opportunities. Your work is going to continue to fill a large part of your life, and the only way to be truly satisfied is do what you believe is great work. Lastly, when I headed up the marketing for a Japanese manufacturing firm, I first became aware of this concept called eudaimonia, which is the fullest and purest expression of what you represent at your most elevated state. So a great Hungarian emigrant to the United States, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, spent decades researching and writing about this thing called engagement, where we're being in a state of flow. Human beings, when we're solving our most complex problems, when we're faced with the most tremendously potentially overpowering chaos and uncertainty, when we're in the moment, we lose all track of time. When there's a high risk of quote unquote failure, that what we're being tasked with is challenging all of our inherent capabilities and skills. That's when, if we rise up, that is the classic definition of eudaimonia. So having said that, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my concepts and my strategies on managing change and navigating chaos and uncertainty. If you'd like to reach out to me and have me present or even share my background experience with you, I'd be happy to do so. And without further ado, I'd like to say thank you for spending time today.